I'm Jen, and I still hate Olaf. 2020 can't change me that much. Quick reminder here at the top that this channel is an inclusive space where Black Lives Matter. If there are things that we can do to make our content more accessible or inclusive, please let us know in the comments below or by sending me an email. All right, today we're going to do a 2020 recap. So first and foremost, this year was insane and there was so much going on. I'm not going to cover the events of the world at large, but just please don't compare your own 2020 to other people's 2020s. We all had our own unique challenges and situations going on, none of which could have been expected. So yeah. As far as my own situation, I am a full-time writer and stay-at-home mom right now. And thankfully, my partner was able to work from home beginning pretty early in the pandemic. In addition, we have my sister living with us, helping us out all the time. So we are pretty lucky as far as resources go. I have no idea how people made it through this year doing distance learning of their own or helping their children distance learn. That's insane, and huge props go out to any of you with that going on. Anyone who had to make difficult decisions about whether or not to go back into their physical office, and any of 1,000 other wild obstacles that went on this year, you did something crazy this year. We all did something crazy this year. We came through this year of finding new information and dealing with a situation that realistically this version of our nation has never gone through, and our world has never gone through. So kudos to you for making it through. This actually doubles as this week's very early in the video edition of advice Jen can dish out, but she can't take. Because as much as I know that it's true that we all deserve credit for whatever we got accomplished this year, I have also spent plenty of time berating myself for not being able to read as much or watch as many new movies or keep my kids off their screens, which I will get to. But that was definitely on my mind a lot more this year than I expected. Quick content warning, I am going to talk about eating and exercising and dieting and body image during this video. If you don't want to see that, we're going to put timestamps in the description below, just if you want to skip over it. So yeah, take care of yourselves. I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about something I don't usually address on this channel because I think it's important to include in my 2020 recap, and I also think it's important to talk about more frequently and with less stigma. So we're going to talk about eating and exercising. I think it's pretty obvious that I'm not a medical professional, so don't take any of this as medical information or advice, and I've also not seen a doctor about these particular habits. So my eating and exercising habits, like many others, definitely shifted as priorities changed and resources became less available during the pandemic. And also I definitely struggle with stress eating. I also know that if I start a diet or counting calories or checking my weight, I get really obsessive about it to the point where I start setting challenges for myself to see how long I can go without eating and the least amount of calories possible. So yeah, I don't do those things. And that means that this year I probably put on some weight. And I had to keep reminding myself of something that I saw online and that I have said to a few other people that have had similar situations going on or complaints or whatever. And that is that this year your body was keeping you alive during a highly stressful time. Regardless of what your obstacles were, there was constant pressure that we weren't doing enough or our lives were not as important as the economy and all sorts of things like that. So that was the only thing that kept me from completely spiraling out, was reminding myself that my body was keeping me alive during a pandemic. And if that meant that it needed a little extra padding, that's what it needed. When we have time and can safely get back to the gym and go outside without causing an anxiety attack, that is when I will do those things. But for now, not on the top of my priority list. Again, I'm sharing this out of transparency and just trying to have more of this discussion go on. I am not providing advice or recommendations for how to deal with your own relationship with your body and eating and exercise. So if you need to get help with that, talk to a professional like a medical doctor or a therapist. Back in April, I made a video about productivity in a pandemic, and I talked a lot about unpredictability and how we have no idea how long this is going to go on and what we're going to need to do, how many precautions we're going to need to take. And quite frankly, I don't know that there's much that's more clear now than it was then, except the fact that this wasn't over in a matter of a month. Over the course of the year, even among all the unpredictability and
unprecedented times,
I certainly got things done. Whether they were the things I expected or not is a different story entirely. 2020 absolutely became a year of comfort where we could find it, which is why I'm not completely surprised that I've watched Rocketman more than I have seen new movies this year. I did, however, take a few movies off my list that have been there for quite some time because there wasn't really anything else to do. So I went deep diving and found them streaming or just finally bit the bullet and rented a bunch of them. Most of the new movies I watched, or new to me movies that I watched this year, were horror. Some of them were on my list for my Stranger Things paper and actually helped me develop my ideas about that a little bit further, even though I wasn't officially working on it. I think Jennifer's Body gets my pick for best first watch of the year. I really delighted in how overt and melodramatic it was. I think this was a good year to watch that movie. It is really delightful. I don't know how else to describe Jennifer's Body. I really loved it. I think Megan Fox is really funny, and I think she's a really good actress. And she deserves way more credit for all the crap she put up with. So watch Jennifer's Body if you haven't already watched it. I also really enjoyed Knives Out for completely different reasons, or maybe not completely different reasons, because it too was pretty melodramatic and banging you over the head. And I think actually the overt nature of it is what made me not love it as much as I wanted to or expected to. I was kind of hoping it would be a little more clever with a couple more twists and turns, but it was still very fun to watch. And also Chris Evans in anything. I'm here for it. I'd have to say The Goldfinch was the biggest letdown of the year. I talk about why I didn't enjoy the book in my Digs and Ditches video, but I also didn't enjoy the movie. I think perhaps this was not the year for some navel-gazing tome and its meandering movie adaptation. I mostly watched it for Finn Wolfhard, who is only in the first half of it because he plays a young version of a character, and he did good. I love you, Finn. But he's not the main character, and he's not a master, major, huge part of the movie. So you did good, kid. But I still didn't like your movie. I might also still be mad about the possible queer baiting in that film. I don't know what's going on there, and I need someone to answer my questions. It could also be that I'm bitter about the fact that the week after I watched it, Ansel Elgort was outed as being another super shitty Hollywood actor who's abused every woman he's ever talked to. Whatever the reason, I didn't enjoy either experience, the book or the movie. So I did do a lot, and I mean a lot, of rewatching this year, both on my own and with the kids. Obviously, we rewatched Rocketman, all the time. Frozen and Frozen 2 were on constant rotation, and that's probably has a lot more to do with the hypnotizing effect that it has on my kids, and also my giant Disney crush on Himbo of the Year, which goes to Christoph Bjorgman, who is apparently off-screen. I had a lot of melancholy feelings about theater shutting down, so we watched musicals as much as we could, especially the SpongeBob musical and Shrek the Musical and Newsies, which came to Disney Plus this year. And while Rocketman is my pick for favorite movie of this year, the best movie by far that we rewatched over and over and over again was Into the Spider-Verse. If you haven't watched Into the Spider-Verse yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. Go watch this freaking movie. The animation style is genuinely unmatched, and yeah, you've seen the Spider-Man story told over and over again. They know, and this is not that same story. So go see Into the Spider-Verse. Buy it on Blu-ray. It's leaving Netflix after Christmas, which, in the words of Lauren, is truly the opposite of a Christmas miracle. So, I don't know, pick it up at Target. Order it from Best Buy. Don't get it on Amazon, but I guess if you have to. It's amazing. It's perfect. Watch Into the Spider-Verse. I kept my book buying pretty modest for a year when I wasn't supposed to buy anything new. We also lost access to physical library spaces this year, which honestly was probably one of the biggest changes in my lifestyle over the course of this year. What started off with plenty of activities at the library, we literally rang in the new year at a New Year's Eve party at the children's section, turned into a year where our local libraries still haven't opened back up. And even when curbside pickup became available, it wasn't an option for us considering we're keeping Sebastian's exposure down as much as possible. I've been really inspired lately by some YouTubers' reading journals, so I might actually start one of my own soon to track more in-depth thoughts and keep track of quotes from my reading. I hope that that will make it easier for me to transfer that information into a review on Medium, and then possibly do some YouTube or even Instagram videos about my reading. Overall, I read 25 books. I finally did not finish a book that I didn't like. I learned about some new resources this year for buying from independent bookstores that are queer or BIPOC owned. This was actually part of a larger effort that was inspired by the civil rights activism that really became widespread after George Floyd was murdered. I was definitely more politically active this year than I ever had been before. That started partially because I knew the general election was coming up, but the events surrounding George Floyd made information very accessible, and it made it easy to find things to do without leaving my house. We made an active effort to put our money where our mouth was and make donations when there was nothing else that we could do. I signed tons of petitions online. I made sure to research the protests and petitions that I was taking part in so that I had a better understanding of the situation at large. And then when it came time to do some phone banking, letter writing, and sending postcards about the general election and the special election in Georgia, I felt way better informed and prepared to speak on the issues that are important to me. The changing regulations and new information on what feels like an almost daily basis sometimes makes it difficult to take those risks and feel okay about it. Another measure we had to take this year to keep Sebastian safe was to take his sister out of daycare. And that was only about a week after we had signed her up and gotten her started back in March. We held out hope that she'd be able to go back sometime in the midsummer, but by the time we hit July and nothing was really changing, we actually unenrolled her until further notice. At this point, neither she nor Sebastian will be back in school until we've all been vaccinated, and even then we'll have to wait a while to find out about the vaccine's efficacy. I did start the pandemic sort of panicking that I needed to essentially replace Flo's school teachers in order to keep the kids on track with their developments and their skills. But with a little help from my therapist and a few friends in childcare, I reminded myself that most kids don't attend school until they're 3 or 4, and they grow up just fine. In fact, this has been my tactic through a lot of parenting panics, reminding myself that the people I love and admire most all have different experiences from the first few years of their lives. Obviously, what we do does have an important impact on how our kids develop. There, even more obviously, isn't one foolproof way to get your kids to turn out right. So we do our best and take cues from the kids. That's kind of all we can do for now. One thing that a lot of people do agree on, however, is that kids shouldn't have access to screens from an early age. That is great, and I do have a lot of respect for people who can stick to that rule. Here's the thing. We have twins, and we spent the first 8 months of their lives with one of them in the hospital, and we've been back a handful of times since then. So no screen time has never really been an option, considering they'd turn on the TV for him overnight, and we've been FaceTiming family pretty much since they were born. Having the kids at home and then being stuck at home with them meant we had plenty of days where we did ban screens. Balancing screen time with our own adult sanity, it's not fun. But on the flip side, my kids have a really good grasp on how to swipe and change Spotify playlists and access YouTube and move my apps around on my home screen. So I guess that's something. No one knows how to raise kids perfectly, and they especially don't know how to do that in a pandemic. Banning screen time when screens became a way to connect with the outside world, including doctors and therapists, was literally impossible. So it was one of those things I had to just kind of stop worrying about as much and do our best. On the only edition of In These Unprecedented Times. Obviously, the conference was canceled back in March, and with it, my plans to travel to Orlando or anywhere, possibly ever again. But I was still a member of both the IAFA and the MWA this year, and I took full advantage of their digital resources, which only expanded as the pandemic dragged on. I resubmitted my paper proposal in November and was accepted for 2021's digital ICFA. So, yay! Before the pandemic hit, I planned to finish the paper and get it published in an academic journal, which got pushed back in my plans at the time, but it's in the forefront now that I have a deadline again. Another goal from last year that was slightly postponed, but certainly not abandoned, and worked out a little serendipitously, was to join the Cat Writers of America. While that conference was also canceled, I did start writing for my local cat rescue volunteer group. I've actually already written about the negative effects of declawing and the importance of a 2-week quarantine period when introducing a new pet to your family. I'm excited to write more and continue expanding my portfolio of animal welfare writing, eventually joining the Cat Writers Association and getting paid to write about pets of all kinds. So if you need writing like that, let me know. One of the goals this year that I did semi-abandon, but not really, was launching a website. This goal, rather than being abandoned, kind of got absorbed and turned into developing my Patreon instead. While I do think a website would be great eventually, I have found that my writerfolio has served the purpose of an online portfolio just fine. Since most of my writing has been published online, it's easy to link it from the writerfolio, and then for anyone who's interested in finding more of my work, it's all right there. I think developing the Patreon right now is more in tune with my career goals and my brand as a millennial writer. Also, continuing this channel for a year, especially this completely wild year with very little interruption, is probably my favorite accomplishment of 2020. We've already planned out the first few months of 2021, and we're looking forward to increasing content and trying new stuff. While this absolutely isn't like a hot take about the pandemic, the only good thing is that we have massively increased the amount of content that is online and the amount of conferences and meetings and conventions that are being broadcast so that they are way more accessible and easier to attend from home. Not being in physical spaces hasn't stopped a lot of these presentations from happening, and that's been awesome this year. I wanted to attend more conferences again now that the kids are getting into their toddler years, and obviously, I couldn't do that in physical spaces, but I did attend the Portland Book Festival for the first time ever, which was amazing, and even attended a few San Diego Comic-Con panels that I wouldn't have been able to see otherwise. This year, I also attended way more write-ins during NaNoWriMo than ever before, and that's because there were way more write-ins to attend from home. So not only did I get to go to meetings on Discord and Google Meets and Hangouts and stuff, but there were also a ton of national and global write-ins available on the NaNoWriMo YouTube site. The MWA meetings are also way easier to attend, considering they, too, are all online. And I don't think there's actually a very close chapter of the Maryland Writers Association in my area, so it may have been difficult to attend meetings if they weren't available on the internet. Finally, let's talk about the actual writing I did this year. The biggest chunk of writing I did in 2020 was during NaNoWriMo, where I did pass 50,000 words in the month, which was awesome and amazing, unexpected, and super fun. And you can find out more about that in my NaNoWriMo writing vlog. I also wrote a few short stories this year, the articles that I mentioned before for the cat group, and lots of YouTube scripts. Next year, I have a few ideas to write more short stories, edit my new novel-length work, and then get started on another novel-length work, and finally finish the Stranger Things paper that I want to look for publication for. This year, I also tried out zines, and I published my own as well as taking part in 2 others, all in the same month, which is why October was Halloween. Yeah, I called it Halloween. It was a lot of fun, and I hope to put out 4 more of my own this coming year. So keep an eye out for those. Now let's talk Writer's Shed. This has been a thorn in my side since August. And here's why. I ordered my Writer's Shed over the summer. I was told, obviously, with coronavirus and everything like that, it would take a while to arrive. I didn't think that take a while would mean you will not get your shed until November. But that is what happened. And so now, my shed has been sitting in the backyard, partially constructed, for several weeks. Because once it arrived, we built it whilst I was writing a novel, and the weather turned because, global warming is real, and also because it was the fall, and weather is not great in the fall. So now I have this shed that's mostly finished in the backyard, and unfortunately, again because of weather, it's currently more like a lean-to. Let's say that. We got so close, and we tripped at the finish line. because our little nutmeg had to go all noble. We're currently waiting on a contractor to come and straighten things out. Literally and figuratively. More on this in 2021, when I feel the pieces of my sanity have been restored. As I say in my super short intro to Writer's Shed building video, this was a crazy learning experience, and I have never embarked on a project like this before, so I am kind of surprised we made it as far as we did. Any other year, this may not have taken as long, contractors may have been more accessible or more of an option, and, you know, the shed might be complete, but we're living in a trash fire. So yeah, 2020. Good riddance to this completely wild, fiery, unsafe roller coaster that never got tested before someone turned it on or something. Even through all the unprecedented shit, I hope you had some time to yourself to work on things that you were looking forward to, and maybe even a few moments of absolute joy. Through it all, I definitely had some times like that. Spending more time with my kids is something I may not have done otherwise. And that's kind of a gift. I don't know. I don't want to get sappy. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please click the like button below and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that bell to get notified every time there's a new video on the channel. If you want more content, including sneak peek novel scraps and semi-weekly roundups of my full writing schedule, you can become a patron. My Patreon and the rest of my social media pages are linked in the description. Stay safe and stay healthy, and I'll see you guys on the other side.
Are you always this articulate?
Hercules. My name is Hercules.